You know, we had some harmony at 1 and 2 for, what was it, 5 or 6 weeks with UConn and Purdue. That's now changed with Houston rising up to number 1 in the AP Top 25. They're the 5th different team to hold the top spot this season. I did mention Purdue, the Boilermakers do inch up to number 2, while the Huskies drop down to 3rd after their blowout loss at Creighton. Taking a look at the top 10, you see the top heavy ACC schools, North Carolina and Duke, coming in at 9 and 10 respectively. And just to verbally give you the back half of the AP Top 25, Utah State, Gonzaga, Florida, Jacqueline, and South Florida rounding out the bottom half of the top 25. All right, let's welcome in our college basketball minds here with Matt Norlander and Jerry Palm. Jerry, I'll start with you. Where do you have Houston in the grand scheme of things when it comes to bracketology?
Well, they're on the top line. They're number 3 overall. Purdue is number 1, UConn number 2. Those two are pretty close together. Houston has 7 quad 1 wins, which is great, only 3 losses. But Purdue and UConn each have 9, and that's why they're ahead of Houston on the bracket. There is an enormous gap between Houston and number 4, to the point where Purdue, UConn, Houston could each lose twice, and they're still going to be the top 3 teams in the bracket.
Matt, I put you on the spot on HQ Spotlight last week, giving your own personal Purdue, UConn, Houston rankings, and we're reminded on social media, too, metrics like Ken Palm certainly love Kelvin Sampson's crew. Where are you at with Houston at the moment?
I'm with Houston being welcome to the conversation, the rest of America. I've been saying Houston is just as good as Purdue and UConn for a number of weeks now, and they proved it by holding on in overtime and getting another win against Baylor. I just remain in awe of what Kelvin Sampson has built at this program. They have gone right into the Big 12 and now are pacing to be the standalone champion of that league and be on the 1 line, which, while Houston had good preseason expectations, I don't think really anyone thought that Houston would win the Big 12 regular season title. It hasn't done it yet, but it's pacing toward doing that and be a number 1 seed in his first season in the best league in the country. So Jamal Shead, I think, is a first-team All-American, and this is a team that has a real chance to win a national championship. It is a deserving team of the great label right now, right alongside Jerry Palm's Boilermakers and Dan Hurley's Huskies.
It's one thing to do it to the AAC, but to do it in the Big 12 this particular season has been fun to watch this particular team. If we're going to stay in the conference, Jerry, what's at stake here for Baylor and TCU tonight?
Yeah, I mean, these are teams that are playing for seed. Baylor's trying to push to get up to the 2 line. They're a 3 right now. It's kind of crowded there between the 3s and the 2s. Not a lot of separation. So, you know, if they can stack some wins together like this, especially this one on the road, this gives them an opportunity to start to make that move. And TCU is a borderline top 25 team in the bracket. So, you're, again, looking to move up on the seed list and possibly move up a line with a win tonight.
Matt, oddsmakers do have this as a close game. Baylor will be a slight underdog. But in your opinion, what's going to be the difference in tonight's game?
I think Baylor's defensive resistance will be the key in this game. We'll see how it responds coming off a game where, you know, Yves Missi, had he made the foul shot, Baylor gets the win over Houston, and it would have been just such a significant quad 1 win. So Baylor is not a defensive first team. How it does against TCU here, I think, is going to be pretty key, because TCU, it rates top 30 in offensive efficiency, but it is not an exceptional 2-point or 3-point shooting team. They play a little bit fast, and they can get the job done there. But I'll tell you this, TCU, how about this? So home against Baylor tonight, but then they're at BYU, they're at West Virginia, and then they close up at home against UCF. That should be a win. But it's actually conceivable here that TCU, like, almost stumbles into a 3-game slide. Just keep an eye on it. I feel like this home game is a bit bigger than some might realize for TCU's seeding moving forward. As Jerry well knows, it's been able to overcome because it's gotten good wins in the Big 12, but it has among the worst non-conference schedules of any high major team that's in that top 30-35 discussion.
Jerry, you want to rebuttal that just a little bit on TCU there?
No, he's right about that. Their non-conference schedule, and it's not just theirs. There's a half a dozen Big 12 teams that are being dragged down a little bit by poor non-conference schedules. Some may not make the tournament because of that. And it does, I mean, it costs you. It even costs these high major teams because you don't give yourself opportunities in non-conference play for the kinds of wins that you need to really make a run for the top of the bracket.
Jerry, you had hinted at some of the gaps here with the 1 and 2 seeds here. If we're talking about Carolina, which you just saw on the graphic, the 4th number 1 seed at the moment. They've got Miami tonight. What's your sort of take on the Tar Heels?
Yeah, I mean, I think they belong number 4 right now. There's a case to be made for Arizona as well. But, you know, if they lose this game, now they've got a problem because Miami's not a tournament team this year. Even, you know, playing on the road, this is the kind of game you need to win if you want to be on the top line of the bracket and start to separate yourself maybe from that 2 line. So, yeah, it's a big game for North Carolina tonight, even though it's not the best opponent. You want to make sure you win it because this is a taking care of business kind of game for a team that wants to be a 1 seed.
They're not playing the same U program that we saw make that nice run last year. Matt, what do you think about the Tar Heels right now?
I think if you're a Tar Heels fan, you're fairly thrilled with the about face. Big picture here, after last season disaster, preseason number 1 team becomes the first one ever to not make the NCAA tournament after being a preseason number 1. And now, as we sit here, UNC a worthy, but albeit shaky, final 1 seed in Jerry's bracket. I think that Carolina and what Hubert Davis has been able to do this season has been outstanding. R.J. Davis in the conversation for first-team All-American. Armando Bacot putting up records. And then that guy right there, I love when I'm talking, we go right in. Synergy right here. Cormac Ryan is shooting 50% from three-point range in his past 4 games. Him stepping up like this gives UNC another dynamic, another facet, another element to having a viability to being a Final Four contender. I don't expect UNC to have much resistance against Miami. And if it were to get toppled and to get beat, that would be shocking because Miami is also shorthanded significantly. And we've seen as of late how that has really hampered them with a number of losses.
Jerry, let me get back to you and talk about Nebraska. What has this 4-game win streak for the Cornhuskers done for their hopes?
Well, it's been good because they've had games where had they lost, they could have really hurt themselves. Nebraska's problem is what it usually is. They have not been good off their home floor. Now, they do have a win at Kansas State. It goes in and out between quad 1 and 2. That doesn't really matter. What matters is that's not a tournament team. That's an NIT level team. If Nebraska can get a better win off their home court, I don't think they can do it in the regular season, but you can in the Big Ten tournament, then I think that's the thing that really gives them some juice to maybe really improve their seed. But if they can't do that, they're going to be a bottom half of the bracket team as long as they really stumble their toes, and then they can fall out of the bracket entirely.
Cornhuskers 17-1 this season at Pinnacle Bank Arena, which is setting a single-season program record. To Jerry's point, Matt, what are the chances they can improve that form away from home?
I'm not convinced yet, and it's unfortunate because Nebraska and its fan base, you realize this is the only high major program that doesn't have an NCAA tournament victory to its name. It's wild. And so they're not making it easy in terms of they rarely get to the tournament, and now they've got a chance. They're in the bracket for now, but the schedule forthcoming for Nebraska, it just has landmines. Like at Ohio State on Thursday. This is an Ohio State team that is now knocked off wobbly Michigan State and took out Purdue, obviously, 8 days ago on CBS. Home against Rutgers, that should be a win. But then they're at Michigan, like road games against non-tournament teams that can really, puncture your tournament resume. I would love to see Nebraska in because, kind of big picture, Tommy, we're getting to a point here with Washington State, Wake Forest, Nebraska. I don't know if all these teams are going to get in. Washington State has room to spare. Wake Forest is really like right dancing on the cut line. But I like the idea of having an NCAA tournament where we've got high major programs that rarely get there, and we can give them some love. Keisei Tominaga from Japan for Nebraska. He's one of the most enjoyable players in the sport to watch. You didn't ask me to predict. I will say Nebraska gets in, but it goes to Dayton. I think it narrowly somehow gets it done, but it clearly has to win at least one more game away from home, if not multiple, and that includes Big Ten tournament play.
Okay. I think Jerry's got him as a 10 seed out west on CBSSports.com. And the last program, gentlemen, that we'll talk about, and I'll ask both of you the same question, except this time I'll go Matt first, and then Jerry, I'll have you follow here. Michigan State, we know the tournament streak on the line. How concerned should Sparty be about its Michigan State men's basketball team at the moment?
Tommy, we mentioned North Carolina just a moment ago. MSU is the UNC of this season, and by that I mean a preseason top 5 team that is playing with fire here. You see the number here. I spoke with Tom Izzo in January, and he has faith in his team. Well, the irony about this, ready for the irony with this team, though? is that Tom Izzo, until this season, had never had, this is shocking because it's Michigan State, he had never had 4 players who were seniors who were returning with starters minutes. Now, he had players that were senior laden, but in terms of 4 senior starters returners, had never happened until this season, year over year, the same exact players. And you would think after a team that made the Sweet 16 last season that they would have more success. It just hasn't happened. I think MSU gets into the tournament. I do. But this is not a team that you can trust. And while normally Tom Izzo does well for himself in March, hey, I might be old takes exposing myself here for 3-4 weeks from now. I have not seen nearly enough consistency or toughness out of Michigan State to have faith that it can win multiple games in the tournament.
Yeah, I agree. Michigan State is just baffling. I mean, your preseason top 5, senior-laden team, as Matt described, and they just can't seem to string things together. They looked like they were going to put themselves into a relatively safe position, and then they lose to Iowa at home, and then they lose to Ohio State at home, a game in which they trailed for 6 total seconds. It's got to be maddening for Izzo. And now you've got to try and right the ship, and your next game at Purdue. Good luck. And then you get home Northwestern. Northwestern's not very good on the road, so you got a chance there. And then you go to Indiana, and they're bad everywhere, so you've got a chance. But, you know, Michigan State's in a desperation mode here. They need to finish strong to make sure that they stay in the bracket. But this has got to be really frustrating for Izzo to have a team that looks like they should be much more competitive than they are, and they just haven't figured it out.
Jerry, Matt, as always, appreciate the information and the insight here on HQ. In terms of information and insight, I'm College Basketball Podcast. Matt Norlander was in CT. We've got Gary Parrish here in Fort Lauderdale over the weekend. Catch their podcast and check them out today.